Our film complies with many typical horror conventions throughout, the most obvious being that the victim is a young blonde female and the killers are all male. A lot of films do this because women are traditionally seen as the weaker sex and more vulnerable and in need of protection, so the audience will feel more fear if a woman is being stalked than if a male was. Also, the girl is alone in her house when the stalker is stood behind her door, another typical convention which is seen in many films, an example being Scream. The reason we strayed from typical title conventions is because we felt that by having photographs of the different women come up, it would make the audience aware of who was being targeted by the stalkers. The negative effect that we put on the photos gives the feel of it being an X-ray, which hints back at the antagonists being scientists and again hints at their profession. Our film revolves around a female protagonist and two male antagonists. We're stuck to the stereotypical horror conventions in that we have the victim as a young blonde female and the killers were tall males. Although this is quite an expected convention, I think it works well in our film opening because the viewer is more likely to feel fear for a female victim because they are traditionally weaker and more vulnerable and need a male's protection. In many horror films, the male antagonist is quite a lot older than the young female victim. However, due to our casting taking place within a school environment, our two male actors are actually the same age as the victim. This takes away from the overall effect, I think, because it makes it slightly less believable, simply because they are all the same age. However, it can be seen as being more realistic that two boys become obsessed with a girl their own age, which adds a darker feel to it because of their young age and the acts of violence they hinted at carrying out. A young female protagonist can be seen as complying with the male gaze theory as proposed by Laura Mulvey, because it is assumed that an audience will be predominantly male and so they're more interested in seeing a female protagonist than a male protagonist. It also complies with traditional beliefs that women are more vulnerable. Our film is seen through the eyes of a stalker, especially the parts where the victim is seen walking down the road on her own or through wooded areas. When you see a glance of a stalker behind her, it's portraying the reality of the situation, as opposed to what she sees. I think that by showing our film from this viewpoint, it brings a sinister feel to the piece because the audience themselves start to feel as though they too are being watched, complying with the idea behind our film that anyone could be targeted. Our film doesn't really show a range of ethnicity or culture, simply because in the opening 2 minutes of our film we're simply introducing the first protagonist, who, to comply with typical horror conventions, is a young white blonde girl. If we were to make the rest of our film, we would use a range of actors with varying ethnical backgrounds to support the idea of our antagonist targeting a range of people from different backgrounds. Due to the nature of our film, we have rated it as an 18 certificate. The reason we chose this age instead of 15, which would make it far more accessible to a wider audience, is because of the sexual connotations apparent throughout and the acts of violence that would take place. Our film revolves around a group of stalkers who follow and murder various girls from different backgrounds. Because of this, younger viewers may be disturbed by the content, which is another reason as to why we have rated it as a higher age. In Britain, 18 is the age you become an adult and can start making your own decisions, as they can decide for themselves whether or not they want to watch the film. It has been suggested that young children can be influenced by things they see on television and in films, and so this is another reason for why we have rated it as an 18, because the people who will then be able to see the film will hopefully be more mature and won't choose to act. Our film also complies with our target audience in that we are aiming to make a film in accordance with guidelines for grades B to D. This means that are made with relevance to British culture with British actors and funded by both Britain and foreign companies, normally America. Obviously our film wasn't funded by any outside groups, but it does make use of British locations and actors. If we were to make a full-length film, we would have trouble turning it into a mainstream film shown at cinemas nationwide. This is because we are, in effect, an independent film company and don't have the backing of bigger companies such as NBS, Universal or 20th Century Fox. Independent companies find it far more difficult to get their films to public attention because bigger institutions can afford to spend extortionate amounts of money on distribution, be it by advertising through magazines, on television, as a trailer for another film, or by bringing out a range of merchandising. Many companies paid food chains to advertise for them too, such as McDonald's Happy Meals, which normally includes a toy from a film that is currently or about to be released. Films that have used McDonald's to advertise include Star Trek, the motion picture, in 1979, 101 Dalmatians in 1996 and Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs in 2009. Because of these reasons, our film would probably be released via the internet or in art houses that specialise in independent films. Some independent films get advertised on social networking sites such as MySpace and Facebook, which means that even though they're not making it into big cinemas, they are being noticed by many people every day. However, the film itself, I think, has a storyline that could be picked up by a bigger studio, because it is similar to several other popular films such as The Strangers and Scream. Because of these reasons, if our film was to be picked up by an institution, working title films would be best for us, because it specialises in British films based around British culture and with British actors. Films that have been produced by working title include The Boat That Rocked, Four Weddings and a Funeral, and Love Actually. Working title is also linked to Universal, a much bigger American institution, which would mean that our film would have more of a chance of being taken to other countries and becoming far more mainstream, with more means of distribution viable for us because of financial help from Universal. Without the help of an institution like Universal, I don't think that our film would be very popular in other countries, because it is very British and doesn't have any big name actors in it. However, I think it could be very popular in Britain if it had the right backing from institutions and suitable distribution. A good way for our film to be distributed would be for it to be run as a trailer in a cinema for a film like Saw, because it is of the same genre and so people who are watching it would probably like ours as well. Because of the genre of our film, it would be difficult to create a range of merchandise for it, because being a horror film there isn't much you could do that people would actually want to buy. If our film wasn't able to be distributed in cinemas, a good way for us to do it would be by using something like iTunes or MySpace and allowing people to download it that way, because it is an easier and cheaper way to get our film into public attention. In our target audience profile, we stated that we were aiming our film at both male and females because by appealing to both genders, we open up the accessibility of our film. Due to the nature of the film, we also gave it an 18 certificate because that way people can make a proper decision on whether or not to watch the film in regards to whether it is suitable for them. Young teenagers may be unable to do this and be disturbed by certain scenes, hence why we didn't give it a 15 certificate.
Oh my god. Oh god, oh god, oh god. Oh fuck. Please don't, please. Let me out. Oh my god. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Ah!
The idea behind our film, I think, can be linked to the opening of Disturbia, released in 2007, where a teenage boy is constantly watching his neighbour, a young blonde girl. Although the storylines are quite different, there are some similarities. In Disturbia, the boy starts off by watching his neighbour, similar to in our film, and these scenes are quite creepy in how intensely he watches her. In our film, the stories aren't seen to watch the victim, but following her on her journey home, which makes it scary in a different way. However, it isn't him who is killing people in Disturbia, whereas in ours, the young male stalkers are. We carried out surveys to find out what features and conventions people actually want from horror films. We gave our survey to 20 people. In regards to the certificate rating, people stated that they would rather see and expect to see a horror film that was an 18, as opposed to several that said a 15 or 12 rating. This perhaps hints at the maturity that people expect from a horror film, and they don't want the typical blood and gore horror, and they would like more of a mental challenge. The results of this survey agreed with what we said in our target audience profile, which I think shows that the idea behind our film was successful and aimed at the right audience. Although by giving it a higher age rating we're cutting down our audience, if we were to make it available to more people as a 15, we could lose more viewers that way because old people may think the film won't be as scary or as clever as if it was aimed at a younger audience.